Hi, I'm Miriam Joy and welcome to my studio. Today we're working on all the buzz, and this has been one of the funnest classes I've ever done. I've really enjoyed developing this method and having so much fun with it. There's a lot you're going to learn, from how to make the honeycomb to kind of using caulking like frosting to make the flowers, the leaves, and the bees, and how to color them so they look really great. I hope you have a great time. Let's get started. For this process, I am going to be using caulking as my medium. There's a lot of reasons that I have done this. One of the biggest reasons is cost. It works very well. I've been using it for a lot of different techniques, so make sure you check out all the videos we've got coming out about that and see all the fun things we've created. But when I was working with clays, this became a lot more expensive, and even with the air dry clay, this is all caulking, it fell off the gourd for me. So I'm not sure what I kind of did wrong. I wasn't happy with the thickness of it. It was harder to push in and use. If I used the quick wood, it was a lot of quick wood, and it got very expensive. So that is kind of the reason behind the caulking. We are going to use it. All of this is caulking. But I did use quick wood on this little guy before. I thought, why not do it all out of the frosting stuff? But you may have a favorite and decide how you like it, why you like it, and do it your way. You can see the detail in the flowers and the bees is so much more so with the quick wood. So that is something to think about. If you like that better, then do it that way. Now, this isn't perfect technique that we're going to be using here. It doesn't need to be perfect. Nature isn't perfect. So back to our caulking. There is different brands. I paid this one, I paid less. I think I paid $1.98 for it at Walmart. I bought this one at Dollar Tree, so that tells you how much I paid for it there. And I bought this one because it says it's fast drying. Normally I don't use fast drying. It doesn't make that much of a difference, but for this space, I think I'm going to use it for the gourd. Ignore the 20-minute part. That has nothing to do with the way we're using it. The reason that the caulking does not dry as fast is because we're going to be using the bubble wrap as our mold, and it holds the moisture in and it can't escape. It takes longer to dry. But for that reason, I do want to use the fast dry on the base. I think that will help it a little bit. They do have different thicknesses. This one is thinner, which works great for the daisies. So, but you can also thicken them a little bit, which we'll get into a little bit as we're going on. So there's all kinds of different kinds that you use. I basically look for the least expensive ones. Walmart is where I usually get mine, unless I'm looking for something like that at the Dollar Tree. You want to make sure for this part we get white. We are going to use a clear for our bees, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. But make sure that you get the white. That is real important. Another thing we want to talk about is the easy caulking gun. If this is something you're going to be doing a little bit of, invest in this. This is so much easier than our old ones that you try to crank and push and they're just miserable, and this just makes life so much easier. You just simply squeeze it a few times and you're ready to go. I'm going to be using tips, and there are different things that you can cover this up with. I usually load my bag about half of the caulking gun. I can tell by how far this sticks out, and you'll notice that as you get going. But there are ones at the hardware store. It's actually what this tip is here, and you can see I've used this one a lot, so we've got it nice and yucky. I've got caulk on it. So but this one is a frosting tip that goes over your frosting tips when you are frosting in the frosting section. Can I say that anymore? So I think this is so much easier to put on. This one, if you use it when you're cutting, if you cut down here, it's easier to put it onto the tip than if you cut it up higher. So that's something to think about. But I kind of struggle with this one a little bit, so I just recently purchased these, and I do like that. If you're not going to do this more than once or twice and don't want to do it anymore, just use a Ziploc baggie and put a rubber band around it. It'll keep it fresh. I've kept it for literally almost a year, I think, one time. It stays fresh a long time as long as you put that lid on. And if you're using it during the daytime, I like to put it on, but because it comes out. But you could actually not have to worry about that as much. So that kind of gives you an idea of what we're using, and then we're going to talk about bubble wrap. Bubble wrap is another fun venture, and this is what we're going to make our honeycomb out of. You want one that's nice and tight at the bubbles, and they're really full. And this was one I picked up at the dollar stores again, and it looked great on the outside, but the more you start to go down, the more you can see it's losing its air in the bubbles. And I had a problem with that. So you also want to think about how you're going to apply the bubble wrap. So if we were going to do it around, I've actually cut this into 3 sections before and have done it that way, so I wouldn't need it any taller than this. But if it's something you wanted to put over the entire thing, you've got bigger bubble wrap. And at the packing sections, like at Walmart or your different stores like that. And again, I ran into the same problem. It was better on the outside, and the farther I went in, the worse it got. So you need to kind of look at it to see how good it's going to be. And another thing with these bigger ones, they have the tear sheets. So we'll show you what I mean. Every 12 inches, your bubbles are flat, because that's where you tear it. And that's great for packing, but that's not so great when you're making a big gourd. So you may have to think about that. Another thing I did is, if I had a sheet and there was a section that the bubbles were popped, I kind of would draw on the back of them with a black magic marker, so I knew where the popped ones were, and maybe I could work around it. I got this in with some packing stuff, and this is actually one of the better pieces that I have. So I'm probably going to be using this one today and put this guy on, and then he goes completely all the way around. When we're doing this, we want to do a gourd that is, we want to put the bubble wrap, but we don't want to go past where the gourd sits. So we can draw a line on there, or we can kind of stop when we get to where we want to. Just know that we will stop at a certain area. Now, gourds, there's lots of different ways we could do. I used the Martin gourds, or what you call the birdhouse gourds, for a lot of mine. I really like that design and shape for them. But it's also something you could do with a cracked one, because you're covering it up so well. If you drill a hole at the top and the bottom of your crack so it doesn't crack anymore, because you don't want it to continue to crack. This one is just one that I had an old scarecrow on, and so I don't even have to worry about getting him off or anything, because I'm just going to go right over him. But you could go as big or as little as you wanted. The one thing I will tell you is these start to get heavy because we're putting a lot on them. So think about your weight. Whether you want to cut the birdhouse open, the beehive open, that is another personal opinion. That is going to be up to you. I have lung issues and I don't like to open my gourds as much, and I think this looks just as cute. If you do want to cut it, go ahead and cut it, clean it out as well as you can, and spray paint it inside as much as you can with black paint. But otherwise, I'll show you how to just remove this. And then when you're putting your honeycomb over it, don't worry about this area. You'll just cut it away with your knife. You can kind of poke it in a little bit so you know where it is for later, but you just simply trim it with your hobby knife. So it's not a real big deal on that one. On our one that I wrote on, we just cut our little honeycomb into kind of honeycomb shapes, and we'll get into that a little bit more as we're going and show you the basics for that as well. And like I said, this one's going to take some time, and it's not so much about the process taking time as the dry time. You don't want to rush it. I wouldn't do this in the winter. I do this in the nice hot of the summer when you have the sun that can help dry it. And you can keep working on things as you're going, letting them dry, continue to work. So there's a lot of fun things we can do, but just don't rush it, and just give it time to dry and be patient. Now, I have found out that when I am working with the caulking, there's so many ways that you can color it, but they're all not concentrated. So it's really, really hard to get the colors. You have to use a lot of acrylic paint, alcohol inks, all of these different things you can color it with. But what works best goes back to frosting coloring. So that's what I use, and I've been using that a lot. I've been fine with how the color stays. Okay, so to do our frosting, we're going to first use our clippers, and this is the easiest way, is just to take this and cut the tip. I've tried all kinds of other different ways, and like I said, I want to keep this a little bit lower, and it's so much easier. It's like butter with that. Whereas I've tried my wire cutters, I've tried all kinds of cutters, and it just doesn't work. I start collecting my disposable containers. This is whipped topping. Do you want all kinds of these saved up? Nowadays everything's getting thinner and thinner, so you might want to start saving now. You also could look at Dollar Tree for items like that. And then I just simply start putting it into here. Now this one Like I said, I usually work with about a half a thing, but that's when I'm using my frosting bags. So I believe we're going to use all of this one up, because we don't want different colors. It wouldn't matter. They'd even out about the same anyway. So don't worry about that if you... Okay, that's empty. You can see that all the way. So we're going to get rid of our gun. Don't have to worry about putting a tip back on him. I'm using a silicone mat to kind of keep things a little bit cleaner. You can kind of wipe it off. If you were doing anything directly on it, if you just kind of sprayed your hands and just wiped a little bit of Pam or vegetable spray on top of that, that would be good too. We're also done with our clippers for now. I'm going to be using brown and buttercream yellow because we want, this is our background color. We have to think about this. This is a background color. We don't want it to be the same color as our brighter yellow on top, and I use crocus yellow on the top, so it's needs to be a contrasting color, a darker color. And I picked up my colors at Walmart, and Hobby Lobby has a good cake section. Watch for their 50% off sales, and that is really good. So I'm going to do a little bit of yellow here. And my cake supplies. The one thing I will tell you is do not use your cake supplies for real frosting. Have a frosting set that you keep in the kitchen, and just consider this a craft supply. Don't mix the two. I may switch over to my spatula here. It's a little bit more heavy duty when I'm stirring it, and I'm trying to keep it where I can show you. And sometimes it's cool to have parts that are different colors, so don't think that you have to do this all in one color. If there's strips in it or there's a part that didn't get mixed well, that's okay. It's kind of cool to have. I'm going to have to add more color to it. Now, another thing to remember when we're working with food coloring is that it darkens as it dries. So you don't always necessarily see the whole color or the darkness of that color. So remember that. But this sure beats painting the honeycomb later. Trust me. But we may show you how that looks. Maybe we'll do our necklaces or something that way. You may have an easier way of doing things. You may know more about frosting and stuff like that. I have just taken this and converted it to the way I use it. There is no right or wrong. It's whatever works for you. So please remember that. If you have a better way of doing it, please do it. I think we need to go a little bit more brown and lay off the yellow. And if it dried and you still didn't like it, you could still paint it. You'd still have a base, so it'd be easier. It wouldn't be as hard. So I'm just going to finish stirring this here, and then we'll start applying it on. I'm going to actually put the frosting on here and let it dry, and then we'll try and glue it on our gourd. So we want to make sure that we have a piece big enough that when we go to put it on, so we can come down a little bit on the sides, it'll cover our entire gourd. So I've already mixed my frosting, and I got a nice brown, and it'll darken up. The other one got way darker. I put in a little bit again of the burgundy to cut the green. It kind of has a green, and then I still went back and added a little bit of yellow. Not as much this time, but we got a nice brown color there. I like that color. So we're going to come and put this on. I wanted to show you one thing here real quick. We don't have a button. Somebody forgot the button. I don't know what happened here, but that is nature. It does it normally, so we are not going to worry about that, and we're going to cover that with our frosting. Okay, so again, we're just going to put this on with a nice even coat. We want to make sure, especially the way we're going to be doing this, that you have enough above the bubbles but not too thick. It does still take a while to dry. I don't know if I had said it earlier. I had tried to use the vegetable spray on the bubble wrap. It just made everything just whoop. It wouldn't cling to it at all. It just fell right off. So we want to make sure that we don't do that. When it dries, it just comes off, and that's how you kind of know it's dry. And also, you don't have any frosting that's squishy. So we want to make sure that we're getting kind of a little bit sharper edges, I guess, on this one, if that's at all possible. Think about where the bubbles are, and you kind of want to bring them over and end them. But we also want to think about how wide our gourd would be, and that's just about perfect right there. I have some tall ones that are tall and thin that would be fun to do. You just got to be careful if you do that. You think about them being top heavy. You may have to open up your gourd and put some weight in it, some sand or cement, quickset, whatever you're comfortable adding weight with. Whatever you do, you really don't usually want something that rattles, like rocks or something like that. I just kind of want to see. I'm going to start at that and kind of come so I know how far we need to bring this. I'm going to go ahead and put a layer on the bottom because we've got time for it to dry, and we're going to put the other stuff right over the top. This can be a very thin layer. It does not have to have, it's just for coloring and texture to match the rest of it. I should have started with this and then gone on. I'm actually pulling a little bit off here. We won't tell anybody. Do not add water to the silicone. It makes it crack. The best way to thin it out, we'll talk about using some other ways, but is to work it and warm it up. It really just kind of thins it out when you're working with it. The more you work with it, the more pliable it gets. So, unfortunately, the bottom of this guy is not flat. It is lumpty dumpty. Otherwise, that would be a little bit easier. So we want to think about how far it comes down on the sides. And you could have marked that. Remember how we set it down? You can take a pencil, set your gourd down flat, and put your pencil straight out where it meets the table, and just turn your gourd around, and then you kind of have a line of where that is. This doesn't need to be perfect. Your texture is probably a good thing here, because we've got all these different textures going on. I think we're almost above the bottom part. And you can see I'm doing this very thin compared to everything else we've done. And then we're just going to let that dry, and we're going to set our other piece somewhere safe and let it dry. It may dry a little bit faster than the gourd. I am not sure yet. The outside definitely will dry faster, but then we've got that inside that is still sealed in, so it doesn't dry as fast. Okay, I'm going to go put them away. So we've got some different molds, and this is the rope around these, and I really like this one, but we have a new mold coming in that's kind of got a combination of the two. So that's one thing I really like, because this one's a little bit hard to get in and out of. If I do them white, I'll just take my caulking gun and put them straight in. The reason that I do this with the caulking or the frosting is because it's pliable, it's bendable. This is what it looks like, and then I can paint it any color if I don't want to put a certain color on it. If you did it with quickwood, you wouldn't be able to bend it. So that's the reason that we do this. And we're going to take our frosting, and like I said, if you had the caulking gun and we're going to keep it white, you could just do it straight into the mold. But we're just going to push it, and you want to do it nice and hard to try and get out any air bubbles. But this isn't perfect. This is not a perfect project. Nature's not perfect as far as everything growing. It's got, you know, googles here and there. It's not crisp and clean on a lot of these things, so don't think about that. And we kind of just press real hard on these and take our knife and slide it across the top and try and get it as even and try and get as little stuff left on top, because otherwise we have to clean that up when we're done. This is going to take a couple days to dry. You know it's dry when it pops out real easy. So allow 2 or 3 days. And if you're doing more than one of these, you may need to do a couple of those, so think about them drying and getting those done while your big pieces are drying. And I try and just push in real hard and then come back and not push in as hard, but get a nice crisp top to it so it's flat on the top. That one's not bad. We'll try and get him a little bit filled up there, and we've got that nice and clean there. Okay, so we're gonna set that guy aside to dry. This guy, if you had a tip, he would be a little bit easier, but I'm gonna open him up and put the frosting in. I can't wait to get our new molds. I don't think it's as tight on top as it is here. You know you've got it filled up when it's squishing out the top. So excuse me if I sniff and snort. Our allergies have been so bad in the wind. You've probably heard it howling in the background. It's been a heck of a year. Okay, now let's work on this guy. See how he's all empty inside. He may look filled up on top, but he's not, and it doesn't take a lot. Now we're not going to be doing the bees with the frosting because the bee molds and the flower molds, you lose the detail with this. It's great for simple things like ropes and stuff like that. You can get away with a lot of stuff, but it starts to lose the detail. And I'll show you the rope and show you what I mean. Excuse me. So I'm going to push those in nice and hard, and I think I have that pretty well. Clean that top off without scraping any off the bottom. Get that side part, and that looks pretty good to me. And we're going to let that dry. I'm going to put my frosting like I did the other one. Remember how we put that in there? See how squishy? That hasn't changed at all. But this is one of the ropes, and this is also a cheaper caulking, so it had more air bubbles and stuff in it. But see how the detail is not crisp and clean? I think that'd be really cool for a nautical theme. I think that looks like kind of coral looking, but that has the 3 sizes, and it's great for whatever size you need, so you've got all those choices. So I'm going to show you how you know if the mold, the frosting is done in the mold, and this is the rope mold. Now we've got thicker widths here, so these little guys will dry faster, and you can see how they're popping out real fast from the mold. They're just popping right out. You want to make sure that anything that is on the top is cleaned off before you pull them out, otherwise you have to kind of clean that off. So it's good to kind of wet your finger and rub across the top, and that cleans up that little rope. And see how flexible that is? That's just incredible. I really like that. And so our next one, he's a little bit, giving me a little bit of a fuss in the middle. So I'm not sure if he is dry quite all the way yet. Usually if they're dry on the end, they're dry all the way through. It may just be because he has some on the edges holding him up. Now on this bigger one, he's not lifting up all the way. So he is still wet. So we want to leave him, we don't want to mess him up, and just let him dry a little bit more, cleaning off those edges so when I pull them out and see all that extra stuff, he'll be nice and clean and ready to go. Now on these ropes, like I was talking about, we've got a little bit of air down in there, and if I had pushed it in maybe with the tip straight from the gun, we wouldn't have got quite as much, but I think it kind of adds to the natural look of it, so I like that, so I'm going to leave that. One of my favorite things to use doing this process is our craft brush hand cleaner, and it is really good, don't look at my nails too close here, to clean this area out, the white part. I didn't use it last time. And then you've also got the little cleaner where if you get any up under your nails, you can clean it with that as well. But this is what I really like. We do have those at miriamjoy.com. But it really helps you clean your nails, around your nails, while you're working with our frosting. We're going to work on our daisies using the frosting. We're also going to talk about them using the quick wood as well. There's all kinds of different ways you can do it. There are tons of decorating with frosting videos. Look up how to make daisies with frosting or icing, and you'll see tons of videos. So know that you can get lots of help out there. There's tons of videos, and just go crazy. I wanted to show you first of all what it looked like using the round tips, and I really didn't like this method. There's different methods out there. You may have something that works well for you, so think about that. We'll talk about centers in a while, but this is using just the circular tips, and I just didn't care for that. I like using the rose tips. This is Wilton 102, 103, and 104 from small, medium to large. That's kind of going to depend on what size of daisy you want. I'm going to be using the 103, I think, is what we used for these. I didn't like going much bigger because your petals got bigger. Again, that's a personal choice. You might like that. And we might go with the smaller one when we're doing the smaller ones. I went and printed out pages. They're what they call like flower nail transfers or dividers. And you can go online and print them out. It comes with different ones. It'll say have different flowers on there as well. So I have a bigger daisy and a smaller daisy, and this comes in handy. I was doing it at the beginning, and I just used my craft templates to make a circle. If anything else, make a circle, and you can divide it out yourself if you want to. And then I laminated these so that you only need the one, and you want to do that after you cut the inside of your paper so your laminate's bigger so it doesn't get your paper wet, and then you can reuse these again and again. So I'm going to be using just the basic white today. Doesn't matter how thick or thin this is. The inexpensive kind is a little bit of an off-white though. So I'm going to use the other kind today just to get that white crisp feeling, but it doesn't matter how thick or thin It does better with thin, actually. And we're going to put this in. I like using the least expensive bags I can get because I can move the frosting down really easy and then just discard with this when I am done. If you use more expensive bags, it's harder to move the frosting around. You can use whatever you want to. Again, this is a personal choice, so kind of know that. And you also can use the saran wrap method. I'll try to do that a little bit later in the video, where you put it in so you don't mess up your bag. But on this, you really only want to use this bag about one time. The reason being, it is thinner and it will pop out on you. Don't use this if you're using thicker frosting or caulking to create like a rose or something where you're applying more pressure, because you will blow out the sides. So we're going to get this ready. And I do like with the caulking gun, I can just put this way down in the bag and don't have to worry about getting the knife and getting it way down there. We can just shove that nose in and just have it right there. We will show you a method later on when we color it, how to put it in with your knife, but to use a glass so that it stays there evenly. Again, like I had said before, don't do more than half of a bag full. I'm going to do probably a little less because I've got some drying already as well. And I'm going to put my tip back on. Keep that covered up. And this is the part I was talking about with these thinner bags. It's so much easier just to push that down. But you can see with the caulking gun, we got that way down to begin with. We're going to start by getting some wax paper and making some little squares for our daisies to sit upon while they dry and to move and hold as we're making them. I'm going to fold this into 5 sections, and if I do this right, it goes much faster this way than doing it piece by piece by piece. I'm going to cut down both sides here. If you need to hold one or put clips on that side, you can, but I'm making sure that I'm getting all of the sections underneath when I cut here, so that we don't have to go back and recut something we missed. Your scissors should slide pretty easy. Try to stay on top of that as much as you possibly can. Now we got to flip it over, do this other side. And then we're just going to come back and put this in squares. Wax paper is easier to get off. It's the same with the caulking. It is real frosting. I've tried different things and it doesn't really work as well. It's just easier to get off. And I don't recommend reusing the square. I've tried doing that too, and you'll pick up other colors and stuff from your frosting. So we're just making these big enough that the daisy fits all the way on them. You can make them bigger or smaller depending on what you're working on. Another thing with the frosting bags, don't try to make them out of the wax paper or the parchment paper. The breakdown from the caulking is just a little bit too much, and it just doesn't end well. So just kind of give you a heads up. We're going to be using a nail flower holder. There's probably some different names for it. If you don't have something like this, you could always use we actually got some small lids like off of a can and then put it on a nail. So there's other ways you could do that, but they're rather inexpensive. But when I put it on, I always put the curved side down so it doesn't get into your flower. So kind of know that I use double-sided tape to put on our template here, and so we can pull it on and off. You can use frosting for that if you want to, but we're going to put our template on here, and then we're going to put our parchment paper on, and you can again use the frosting here. So we've got our template, we've got our little frosting bag ready to go, and we're going to use the fat end towards the outside, and we're going to push and pull. So we're going to kind of push it down. Now you could do it on the line or you can do it between the lines. I'm going to leave that up to you, whatever you're comfortable with. And just kind of push that down and pull that towards the middle. So we're going to push it down and we want to pull that towards the middle. The one thing that we want to try and do with these is connect these. We don't want these not touching enough or not enough of the petal that you don't pick them up and you actually lose the petal when you try to do the flower. So that kind of is important. Of course, when we put the center on, that really helps pick those up. So that's something to think about. Now you can see by using our nail here how much easier it is to turn and to hold as we go. Push and pull. Push and pull. Now remember how we talked about as this warms up, it's a cold day today. I can't believe how cold it is for this time of year, how it will get thinner. So I'm actually not touching all the way. I'm above the template a little bit, and you don't have to follow your pattern exactly. It's just an idea. So if you add one leaf or two instead of one, I want you to see how different that petal is and that petal. I didn't pull up enough here. I slid too much. So push and stop and pull, and push and stop and pull. So we have our first little daisy, and what I do is I have a little tray. I take my first one and I lay it on my tray. Then we keep working from there. You might want some where you miss a petal on purpose to leave that with a blank space. You might want to do some bigger, smaller. So that is totally up to you. Like I said, there's lots of videos. This is a personal thing. I'm not telling you that there's only one way to do it. There's lots of ways that you can do it. So know that make it your own and don't think about how you have to do it like everybody else. Now we've kind of got one there, and I just really have a hard time with that. I don't know why. It's just my personal opinion. Now be careful when you're pulling through. You don't want to pull it back so far that you start to get into the other petals and mess them up. So kind of know that. So we've kind of done our first petal there. So let's show you a half flower. This is what a flower daisy would look like from the side. So we're going to do a side one. So it's just going to be half of that. But we want to think about it's going to have more of a curvature on the petals on the side. See how they curve more than being straight out. So we want to start with a little bit more of a curve going into the center, and then kind of maybe curving that next one a little bit, maybe that center one kind of pulling him straight, deciding if you want to do 5 petals or however many you want. And we're going to start working our way back up to the other side. Now there's 5, and to me that is not enough. We need one more petal on this side to even that out. So there we have our half daisy. So now let's switch over to our smaller daisies. We do want different sizes. And you don't have to make these all exactly like the pattern like we talked about. The nice thing about this is you can just take your tip off and change out tips. I usually, if I'm done with this one, I usually squeeze this into the next tip that I'm using, and I am going to go to the 102 so that we can get smaller ones in there. I might even do the bigger one just so you can see how big the petals are. And let's put a little bit of double-sided tape on here. And I let these daisies dry a couple of hours before I put my yellow in, because you don't want your yellow to bleed into the daisies, or maybe you do. I like the white for this pattern. It keeps it real kind of crisp and clean, but I'll show you what a colored one would look like. So we're going to start just doing this exactly the same way as we did before. It's just going to be a smaller daisy. If you want even smaller ones, get yourself a circle. And they don't have to be circle either. They can be a little bit of a different shape, like more rounded out at the sides. There is no reason that it has to be just circles. I don't suggest squares, but hey, you never know. And don't forget on your smaller ones to do some half ones of those. I'll show you the difference in size. So we've got our bigger one and our smaller one. But remember, this is just a guideline, so you may come in and think, okay, I want even a smaller one. So let's try doing him even smaller. And I've kind of got him out of the circle here that I'm trying to make, but remember how we talked about having them different shapes. The one thing I will talk to you about is, let's leave that one like that. We've kind of got that petal missing, but that one kind of looks like it's folded over, so that's even smaller. On this one, this is one of the first ones I made, and I want to show you these leaves were too close together. This one isn't quite as bad as some of my first ones, but they're not separated nearly as enough. They kind of just don't have that petal feeling, where that has more of a petal feeling. So don't put them so squished together that you're losing the shapes of your petals. And I just go ahead and do as many as I have in my little frosting bag, and do me up a tray full, because we want several. You'd be surprised how many there are. Let's take this guy for example. I've got 4 just in that grouping. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Just on that tiny, tiny, tiny gourd. So think about how many you need for a bigger gourd, or these are great to have pre-made ahead. And I've done cards, I've done the frame, as you can see. That turned out real cute. So there's lots of fun projects that we can use with it. So don't get stuck in just thinking that you can only use them for gourds. So having extras is a good thing. I wanted to show you the frame and the Be Happy card, and look for these videos that'll be coming, and you can see the difference in the leaves there. And remember, what we're using is just a pattern, so if you want to make your own size or shape, you can. Feel free to do that. I wanted to show you the big tip. This is a 104. And just making these bigger. So we're going to show you. I'm going to come out to the edge on these, and you can see how big. And you can see I'm not squeezing these and making these thin. There's a lot of frosting underneath these. So if we did one down, pressing down, and just did a little bit, you'd end up with something like that. So we want to be above it, press down, and then pull. And I could even come out a little bit wider on these, but these look even so much more different than our other ones. So just use, and you can see I didn't always hit every one on there. I hit like every other one. Let's try one more here. And I'll try and hit every one here. I'm going to come out a little bit further here. I'm going to follow the lines this time. I'm already scooting over a little bit because there isn't quite as much room. And that's okay. That's just to give you an idea how we talked about that. Well, we've got some of these larger daisies now if we needed to cover up something or not cover up something. Aren't those pretty? Alright, let's get started on our leaves. To clean the tips, I'm going to show you what I do. First of all, as I take a napkin or something I can throw away and get rid of all of the frosting that's in them that I physically can, that's still up in the tip. You do not want to put that down your sink. As soon as I get that as good as I possibly can, I put that in hot water in a little container so that will start to dissolve. With these, like I said, these are kind of a one-use bag. Even the disposable, like Wilton brands and everything, I'll use those several times before I'll toss those, but not these. I just cut that, get rid of the plastic, and get rid of that extra frosting and dissolve it in the water. What I do is I have a toothbrush that I use exclusively for that. I hope I don't use it for other things. And I scrub these after I've soaked them to remove any of the extra with the scrub brush. And then you have a tip cleaner, and you just take your tip cleaner and put it up in there and just remove everything till it's nice and clean. And that is how you clean the tips. So on this one, I decided I'm going to try lemon yellow, and we're going to see if this kind of brightens up our flower and sets it instead of it blending in a little bit more. It may pop that, so we're going to kind of play with that. Now, on this one, I used the Buttercup Yellow with just a tad of orange. So that's how I've done it in the past. And we'll kind of take a look. Now remember, that's going to darken up, but that looks more like a daisy centered to me, so we're going to play with that. But I'm going to show you another trick here. We're going to do this and show you. My thing has come off my plastic wrap or saran wrap, whatever you're using. How to put your frosting in here so that it doesn't dirty up your bag, especially if you're using a non-disposable bags or you have a nicer bag that you want to not get rid of. You simply put it in the middle of your saran wrap. Get this as thin as I can get it out of here. Looks pretty good. Okay, and then we're going to take our bag we're going to roll up the sides. You want to roll that up real well so it can't sneak out the sides. And we're going to take this and we're going to twist it. I'm going to cut this end here just a little bit, just so I have a nice clean end to push through. You push that all the way through here till you start to get to your frosting. And you trim that off. We're going to go ahead and put on our tip that we're going to be working with. And there you go. And if you did it right, when we're all done, you'll just open this out, take that part out, and your bag should be pretty clean. Our daisies are dry enough. They're not dry enough to peel away or do, but they're dry enough to put the centers in. And I wanted to talk to you about centers. There's anything you want to do, you can do. Again, go look at videos, do different things like that. You can put star tips. This is kind of the bigger tip like that, but you can use star tips. I know these aren't great daisies, and do centers like that. You can use one of the bigger round tips and put that in and just do a circle. That's up to you, however you want to do it. This is also a round tip and just swirled around and around. And then we have the ones that I did with just a little tiny star tip or a little tiny circular tip. So that's all up to you. Whatever you want to do that center, however you see that center, you can do it. I'm going to try a little tiny star tip here. There's all kinds of fun things we can add to it, and we want to do it while it's kind of wet. And doesn't get too dry. So I usually do about 5 if I'm working pretty good before I stop and put my center stuff in it, if I want to put some center stuff in it. And I like the little star tip. This is nice and kind of hard right now, so we're getting the detail in that, which is good. This is a little gold glitter. It's called Gala Glitz Brown. It's called Art Glitter. It's got all kinds of fun stuff in it. It's got little micro beads, and then it's got micro beads in it. So you get all of these little fun things. So make it even look more like a sunflower. I've got glitter. I've got some little octagon glitters. I've got some micro balls, which I used in most of my other ones. And I think it just kind of makes it, give it that sunflower feel. So there's all different kinds of things that we could add to that. You could even come in if you wanted to, and instead of doing little flowers like that, just kind of bring it around in a circle here. Make sure the one thing is you're kind of getting all of the little petals all connected. This keeps them uniform and connected to your flower. That's one thing that I do suggest. Those are our little micro balls on there, and I like that too. I'm not sure which one I kind of prefer. So the one thing, this is a little bit thicker right now. There's a couple of ways you can thicken up the frosting. Don't thin it with water. We've talked about that. Don't thin it with water. Water makes it crack. But to thicken it up, you can add cornstarch to it. But one of the ways that I have been most successful is to go put it in the freezer and just freeze it, make it cold enough, and then use it again. Of course, it warms up depending on how much you have in the bag as you're working with it. Now, I wanted to talk to you about the half circles, because this would actually be kind of a little bit of a half circle here, and then we would come over here, but this half circle part would be sticking up above our daisy. And actually, see how thin these petals are down here? We need to go another row down here. Okay, so that is good. Let's try a little bit of maybe yellow or gold glitter this time, just to kind of see what that looks like. That's pretty. That's really pretty. The worst you could do if you don't like it is paint it. If you don't like that color, I'm just going to kind of figure out how that would look on our gourd, if that would kind of make it pop. So there's the color difference between the two flowers. So this is really not hard. As simple as you want to make it, as hard as you want to make it. So we've got like this little guy here. Now see how I have some thinner petals here. You always can also work on your inside and then do a row around, and then do, if you need to, add a few here and there, or do another row around that. So just have fun with it. Don't make it harder than it is. And fill in your flower centers. When I have extra frosting left, I make these little poof things, and those are great to fill in other places or decorate or to do other things with. Not necessarily on this piece, but on other pieces. So I am just using one of the star tips. You can use any of the star tips, it doesn't matter. And I just finish using that all up that way, and that gets rid of my excess, and then I have fun little things later. I really like to put glitter on these. I think it makes them really, really fun. I'm going to do some frames and some little things like that that I think would be cute for little girls or women that like bling. And I'm going to go ahead and just finish using that all up. So I finished up using all my yellow, and we wanted to show you how this bag comes out now. Get our tip off of here. Of course, we still have to clean that up, and that's okay, but this is all that outside bag. You simply would pull that out, and you have little to no mess, and all of your throwaway part is right there. Okay, I've mixed my green up, and we'll talk about green colors in a minute, but I wanted to show you a little trick when you're trying to load up your colors, and to make it easier, just use a glass or a jar or something like that. It holds on to it, and you can put that in so much easier. Old spaghetti jar, anything like that works really well. And again, I emphasize, keep your craft tools in your craft room. Don't mix them with your baking stuff. Thrift store is a great place to pick up items like that. It's inexpensive and price is right. Okay, we got this leaf guy ready to go, our green, and we're going to talk about our green colors. I got a mess going here. I must be a good artist. So they have a bunch of great colors, green colors. I pick the brighter colors because with the white that we're doing, we need some brightness in it. So that's the reason that I like the brighter leaves. I actually use leaf green. By the time we get done painting it and everything, it's going to be brighter than it looks. One of my new favorite colors is moss green, and I started putting a little bit on the outside because it doesn't look like it does here. So I took a little bit of my frosting and I laid it on the lid, and that way you kind of knew. And this is the moss green, and it's kind of a more of moss color, but a not so bright green, and that's what it looks like when I got done treating it. But this is a sunflower. I will be doing a video on the sunflower. We'll do some ladybugs, so check that out. But that is the moss. The Kelly green is more of a Christmas green. It's more of a blue green when this is more of a yellow green, I guess. So just kind of know that. There's all types of videos out there to show you how to do leaves. There's all types of leaves that you can do with different tips. It's just a personal opinion. I am going to stick with a leaf tip. The reason being, it's flat. It works well with the putting it under the daisies. We want to think about that. We need a leaf that can fit under the daisies. It's not too fat. This one even got a little fat there. So we'll talk about keeping that flat. So let's look at maybe like a 70 tip from Wilton's. There's a 70 and there's a 67. You can see this guy's wider on the side, so it's going to make a bigger tip. It's going to be a little bit fatter. We don't want too fat. See, you're getting into that thickness there with that tip. That would be great for like a poinsettia, which I plan to do down the line. So think along those lines, but we want it a little bit thinner this time. We've also got a different tip which doesn't put the line down the center of the leaves. This is a 352. So there's different ones you can try, and they go from really big, I don't even have the really big ones, to really small, and this isn't my smallest leaf. So if you wanted to do some small ones, you could do some small ones. So think about that. We'll play with a couple of the different types here. And I think I want to try, I'm deciding between the 67 and the 70. I've got some bigger flowers, so maybe I'll go with the 70. We'll start with that and kind of see how that goes. So I'm using my tray again with my wax paper, and this one we're not going to do one by one because it's just a simple push and pull. So we're just going to be using the tray. Again, I like these. You can put a clip on here, and so I can hold it up underneath my hand, and that's why I never fill my bag more than a half of the way full either. But you want this so the sides are off to the side, and we're just going to, I'll probably move down the line here, push and pull up to kind of get that tip. Now those tips can be a little bit hard, and you can use your fingers to form them, and the thinner it is, the better it is usually, and sometimes it's a booger. So we're going to push it and pull it up. That one was better. Some days it just works better. I think it's a temperature. It is a cold day today, and the more we do this, the better it's going to get. You see how wide our leaf is here, but we don't want the tail too long. We don't want it to be long and thin. We want it to be more fat. And I think this one's great, but I think our next tip will probably be a little bit better for our daisies. But our big fat ones that we made at the end, which I really like those bigger ones actually. So we want to make sure that we have enough for those. One thing you can get away with that you can't with frosting, you can cut it with the scissors after it is dry to form that tip. So that's a sneaky thing to know that nobody else kind of uses. You can add things to this while this is drying. You can add pigment powder after it is dry, but you can add glitter and micro balls and all kinds of fun stuff to it. I love to do that. So we're going to switch to our 67 here. And let's try it. It's not going to be as fat, but you can already see the difference. You can already see the color change between the two. This is already starting to darken up, but see how this one kind of will give me more. I can pull it up at the ends where I couldn't quite do that with the other one. So you definitely can see the size difference, and you probably want different side differences. But you see with these tips, you're getting the line down the middle, and we're going to paint on both sides of it. The artistic part of this gourd is not in the honeycomb. It is in the details to the flowers that we're adding to it. If you really look at it, honeycomb isn't that great. It's just a background. But all of the detail and what makes it really stand out are the flowers and the bees. So that's why we're going to really decorate and add to those. You could keep it as simple as you wanted to. If you didn't want to paint it and do it just like frosting, that's fine. But I really think that that is where it shines, is in the decoration or the paint that's added to it. Now, to get the leaves a little bit more wiggly, you can wiggle it back and forth and give it more shape. The thing that really helps on these, especially the daisies, is practice, practice, practice. Practice, practice, practice. You're going to find something that's going to work for you. It may not be what works for me. So don't be afraid to try it. But those are really cool leaves. And see how these are really kind of more flat in the middle. They're not as high up as the beginning ones, so they'll be easier to stick under the daisies. And these go so fast, you can just whip these out. I want to try one more tip. I'll have to look up the number and add it to my video. But you can see the difference in this tip. And let's show you a bigger one here. Is this only has one big V, nothing on the sides, where this has a little V and the leaf comes out the sides, and this makes the little V in the center. So let's try this one. I want to see what this tip does. I've been wanting to try this tip, and I have not used it right, but I've seen it done with leaves, and I want to figure it out. So I think we hold it this way. I could be wrong. We may have to turn it the other direction. Yep, we got to turn it the other direction. So it's the V's to the side. Ooh, that's nice. Isn't that nice? I do have a larger one of those. I really like that. I have seen the tip used this way as well for different decorations, but isn't that pretty? Push and pull, push and pull, push and pull. Could even push it a little bit more, make it longer. I want to try the little bit bigger one, and I'm starting to run out of green. And then we will have our leaves done and ready to dry. And then our daisy should be about ready to go back and add the centers to them. This might be my new favorite leaf. I'm going to finish them up.